The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. It's Brian and Mr. Betcher from Breaking Down Security.
Hello. What's going down?
Not much. Miss Berlin is not with us again this week, sadly. Well, to be fair, it is a family thing, and as I have mentioned more than once on this show, that family is more important than our little podcast. So she's in the sunny, touristy area of Yuma, Arizona, enjoying spending time with her son, who's in the Marine Corps. So hoorah to all those folks over there in Yuma, Arizona. And yes, she'll be back with us hopefully in a couple of weeks here with escapades. I did see, just in case you are not up and following her on Facebook and or Twitter, the proposal for her second edition of her Defensive Security Handbook, which she wrote with Lee Brotherston. So they are definitely working on version 2 of that, which was, I would say, as seminal a tome as Tony's Building Virtual Labs book was. So if you are looking for that book, I would assume anywhere between a 6 to 9 month lead time. So hopefully we'll get it sometime in March or April next year, I would hope. So keep your eyes out for that. And of course, I will definitely bring it up to Miss Berlin as it gets closer to see what's going on with that. So you should write a book, Mr. Betcher.
Ooh. What, on how to raise chickens or something?
Hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I could definitely see some, forensics or incident response or something. I mean, No Starch does a ton of that stuff.
Yeah,
no
doubt.
Incident response with LogMD
not.
or no.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
it takes a lot of time.
It does. Yeah. I do remember her telling us fun stories about that, where the hours seemed a little long, so I hope that it goes well, and it's very similar to how Tony's is, where it's like they're just adding things and updating language and blockchaining all the things, because that's what defensive security is all about now, just blockchaining all the things. And so we'll get some more information from her, and hopefully have her and Lee on as authors to talk about that in the coming months here. So we're looking forward to that. So Mr. Betcher, we have a guest this week.
Really?
Yeah. I want to bring back I want to bring back the green room trope. Yeah. No. Now this person, one of our slackers, Jen Shear, as she goes by on Twitter, had posted a link to this person's blog post, and I was really excited about reading it because one, it has to do with application security and team building, and a lot of things that really resonate with me now that I'm a filthy PM. I don't do security. I don't pop them shells anymore, or never really did. But I asked Jen if this person would be interested in coming on, and the first reply I get back from Jen was, yeah, she really liked the name of your podcast, and she was trying to think of a cool podcast name for herself as well. And I was like, well, with her last name, I could definitely think of a few, and maybe we could talk about that here on the show. But I'd like to invite Liz Sailing. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be here.
Yeah. So when I found out you had agreed to come on the show with us, first thing I was like, wow, okay, you're sailing through security, or I was something like that. We were talking a little bit before the show about how Breaking Down Security came out, which to be honest, it wasn't all that clever, but I could definitely. You should definitely do that. That would.
Yeah, I've been noodling on it since I saw your name. I'm like, oh, I totally need to capitalize on the surname antics here. I love it.
Yes, that's awesome. All right, so Liz, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into, InfoSec or security or AppSec and DevOps, and what you like to do for funsies.
Yeah, you bet. I have been in engineering now for more years than I would maybe care to mention. It's been a while, but yeah, I've been engineering management and leadership for the last 20 something years now.
Nice.
I actually cut my teeth as a database administrator way back in the early days.
Very cool.
I've gone through the full rounds of software engineering and programming and sysadmin and sysengineer, and then back to all the things. But right now you'll find me, I'm a director of engineering. I am also a certified life coach. So I love to do all the things. But yeah, in particular, this year has been one of a lot of growth for myself personally, of course, but with the company that I'm with. And it's kind of brought me back to basics a lot. Like as we're reforming and redoing a lot of things and things are changing very frequently, I was like, I just want to kind of level set expectations, start capturing these things that I've been tracking through the years and gathering and collating. And I want to put them together, for me, like I need them, but I love to share them because I love to read these things too. So yeah, that's kind of how we came to be talking here today.
Very cool. So, life coach. What does it take to be a life coach? I actually know people who are them, but I've never really took the time to ask them what it means to do that. What's curriculum look like to become a life coach?
It's interesting because it's not a regulated industry, so it totally depends on the school of coaching that you choose and align to. And there's a lot of different ones out there. I myself went to the life coach school with Brooke Castillo. I got into it because through years of being in engineering and in engineering leadership, right, it can be very busy and consume your life if you let it. And I definitely let it. And I let the burnout set in a little bit, and had somebody recommend a coach to me, and it helped me so much. And I found it so profoundly fascinating that I started following it a little more. And yeah, then I decided I want to do this. I want to, especially because I think it's so useful for women in technology and for people with families and all these things that we feel are conflicting, and they don't have to be. So I kind of did it as a bit of a forcing function for myself to stay sharp in those areas. And then, yeah, love to share about this stuff.
Very nice. Okay. Yeah, so we have the blog post you can find on lizsailing.com. There's a link in our show notes, SWE-team-5-pillars. So I had a couple of stories, and I actually literally just added one because you're talking about organizing teams and managing people. Made me think of some of the PM stuff that I was thinking of with storming, norming, performing, and
yes,
storming, forming, norming, and performing. Yeah, and then adjourning, of course, which didn't make any sense, but they added that. But the blog post you wrote is about the 5 pillars of well-rounded software engineering teams. Now, I guess I should maybe you could give us a little background of why you decided to write this article. Was there any motivation behind it specifically?
Absolutely. It's one that I'm sharing. I have a new department that we're putting together, some existing teams, some new ones coming in, and I love that opportunity to kind of level set expectations with current managers coming in. And really the reason I wanted to put it out there, especially with the rewards and check-in cycles that we do with our teams and a lot of these larger companies, right, is we have these conversations with individuals and we focus on calibrating the individuals, and we do all this work to focus on the individual, and it is wonderful. And I wish we would do the same for our teams, right? I wish we had a little bit of a framework for the teams themselves and how we form teams and what we expect of the teams and how the people function on the teams. And so really it's almost a, letter to my departments and the people I work with, right? Like I'm not speaking for my company here, of course, I can't take that credit, but this is something that's very important to me. And I love the focus on how a team can operate. And I want to point out here, before we get too far, that this is one model, right? This is a model that I love, that I found that works really well for me and the teams that I like to lead. But there's so many models out there, right? There's so many that are focused on like, how do I really get high performing and just massive producing at any cost almost, right? And there's some people that I follow that I find the things that they offer are so fascinating. But for me, this is like, I'm kind of in it for the long game. I like putting in that extra investment. I like making space for folks that are early in their career or early in role and letting them train up in part of the team. Anyway, so this is all me just organizing all my thoughts, things that I've tracked over the years and wanted to share out as one option.
Okay. So you have mentioned that there are multiples. Is there any specific, I'm thinking of things we'd like to add here to the show notes, but are there different models or different management?
Absolutely. And honestly, I will have to get back to you on the one that is right here in front of my brain. I can't think of it. She did a study with Netflix. And I read her work and I love it, but I'm not thinking of it right now. But that is one of those that I found incredibly fascinating. And it really is about what a high performing team looks like, and sometimes goes right in the face of some of the things that I'm claiming here. And again, I don't think any of them are wrong. I think it depends on the situation that you're in and what the objectives are that you're trying to achieve. Me, myself, I'm in it for the long game, right? And I can see where you can get like really short-term performance bursts and get a lot of stuff done. Personally, I like to just take it down just a notch and build these teams that are really going to function well together for a while.
Right. Okay. So one of the things, and when I started being a PM, one of the first books that I had read was The Goal, which I think is probably pretty much required reading for everybody, even though the scenario and it's a bit dated these days. Somebody had tweeted out the other day saying, that they I was talking to my friend Mark Harrell, who I actually worked with at IBM. Mr. Betcher knows him as well. The goal is a great idea, and it works for high performing team to create a high performing process, and therefore high performing teams and organizations. But we often, and the one thing I have realized on this on the back end is that the people element of this can lead to burnout, because there's no way to temper the efficiency versus the people element of it. And in this case, being too efficient at a business process can often lead to not having any opportunities to have a break, or because you're always just bouncing from one thing to another. And that can often lead to, burnout for employees, especially at places where, you interview with these companies are like, oh yeah, they're going to burn you out or whatever. And you're good for about 2 years and then you move on because you're so burnt out on these things. Maybe it's not often because they're high performing. It's just, they're not very good at efficiency, but, is having really efficient business process, something that we should strive for? And how do we temper that with, maintaining burnout? And I know we're going off of your blog post here, which I want to get back to, but
sure.
The question, you brought up makes me ask that question.
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. And I think there's so many different angles that you can take this. The one thing that I've learned through my own personal journey, right, with burnout is how much my own thoughts and feelings and beliefs factored into my own burnout, right? And I did a really great job of blaming every circumstance around me. Like, look at the company and look at my boss and look at all these things around me. And all of that is not to say it's not a factor, but learning for myself, my own role in that and how I needed to step it up and not just be swayed by all these things that are happening at the company. So there's that aspect of it. But at the same time, when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the departments and the teams that you're responsible for working with as part of, right? We also have roles and responsibilities in those cases. And what can we do to take a look and slow down? And like, one of the things we can talk about this more as we get into some of the specifics, but one of the things that I love to do with my teams is check in, like, hey, how many undesirable hours are your folks working? Do you know? Have you asked? Are we tracking that kind of at a high meta level to say like, whoa, this is trending in a very bad direction. Perhaps we need to take a breath and look at why that is and do something about it. Right. And so as much as, like I said, with my own experience, as much as I had to set boundaries for myself and regulate myself and how I felt about it, I think the companies really do have an obligation to form this framework and help support the people so it doesn't go on every single individual to discover this for themselves. And that was a very long-winded answer, Brian. So I hope that touched on what you were looking for. But yes, I could talk all day about burnout and organizational patterns and all of it. I love it.
Yeah, no, the one thing I think some people are afraid of saying is, hey, I'm either not working enough or the hours that I'm working are not benefiting myself or the company. And it's like, was it like Office Space? It's like, I really only do about an hour's worth of work, Bob, that kind of stuff, and, or, it's like you're working 5 days a week, but are you really working 40 hours in that, and are those 40 hours, if you're forced to work those 40 hours or even 60 or, 40 or 50 hours a week, are those actually useful and purposeful hours? Because it may only be 20 purposeful hours and the other 20 you're sitting there chatting on Slack or dealing with communications leading up to being and having purposeful work. So yeah, finding ways to communicate better potentially, especially since everybody's now pretty much work from home for all intents and purposes. Most folks are that less purposeful work is definitely taking up a lot of time. So at least it is for me.
Yeah. And that's something we talk about all the time. Like my favorite just happened again this week where we were talking about how much time we spend on interrupt work and how much time on support and how much time on alert response. And then everybody's like, can we talk for a minute about how much time we spend in meetings?
Right.
Right. Yes. Yep. Let's talk about that.
Yep. Yeah. I just had a friend of mine say, hey, we've got a product coming up. We don't need all of our engineers in meetings. We actually need them to be heads down working on this product release because GA is happening next month. So if they're in 5 hours or 6 hours of meetings a week, that's 5 to 6 hours of less time that they have, nose down, ready to, fix the issues and get that done. So, sometimes the PMs have to take on the 5 to 6 hours of work meetings and let the engineers actually do the engineering thing. So that makes a lot of sense.
And it's super interesting, right? When we ask people to take a step back and look at their times, my favorite is like, well, why do you want to know? Am I in trouble? Do you think I'm not working enough?
Right.
I'm like, no, hold on. Not at all. Actually, just the opposite. I want to make sure that you're working in a way that works for you. And we like you. We want you to stick around. We want you to be, as high performant and successful as you can be. And we want to set you up for success. That's why we're asking.
Right. Yeah. I saw the story about 4-day work weeks in Europe is becoming a thing. And I wondered about that. I was like, wow, how are they going to get 8 hours of less work done? Then I was like, well, maybe we're not actually doing 40 hours of work in a week, and we could be a little more efficient with our working time, which would make sense if you're doing a 4-day work week or whatever. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the folks over in Europe and that, because most of us work for not most of us, but a lot of people work for multinational organizations. And if Europe starts passing 4-day work weeks, that's going to affect how we in the US do work, because, it's, Monday morning we're working, but, Switzerland is not, for instance. So, we have to modify our own work days. So that might actually, I don't know how soon that will be, but I see that becoming like a no meeting Monday because all of our people won't be here or something like that. So
is it too spicy to suggest that they kill daylight savings time at the same time? Can we have them do that? And then we follow that as well. Let's do that.
Well, as many state governments has tried and failed to pass, getting rid of daylight savings time. It would be great if we could get rid of that. Maybe baby steps. Maybe we start with all
right, fine.
Maybe we start with that. So,
I think the reason they have it is because it saves a ton of energy.
Does it? Does it really?
Yeah, because you're not leaving at dark, and so when you leave when it's dark, you tend to leave lights on. And so they're on all day, if you leave the house, things like that.
I have LEDs, so I use all of about a penny's worth of electricity. So I will pay that offset for getting rid of daylight savings time. My thing is, how much, should we continue doing? Because some people are like, well, we should double down on that. We should, always be on daylight savings time. And then I was like, well, okay, well, what would keep us from moving the hours continually forward where it's like, it's dark, the sun doesn't come up until 10 o'clock in the morning for us. And then, everybody's got, it's always 10 o'clock at night before, the sun actually sets regardless. So what keeps people from moving it, continually further ahead. So there's nothing really, but it would just be really weird. But okay. So the whole reason we're here, well, not the whole reason, but one of the reasons we were here is to talk about Liz's well-rounded engineering teams. And we touched on a few things about how to create those folks, but you stated at the beginning here, you said most places I've worked offer models for periodically reviewing employee performance and having career development conversations. I haven't seen great ones for teams and have ended up creating my own over time. So what have you seen lacking at those other organizations? If they're missing something about performance evaluations or how to talk about career development? What's missing there?
Yeah, you bet. One key example that comes to mind, and I've seen several examples like this, but there's one case where I had an individual that we were reviewing and calibrating to see, were they ready for advancement and the normal conversations that we have a lot. But in this one case, they were saying that this one individual just didn't do this one thing really well. And I just pause for a moment. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This one aspect out of the 21 that we measure and and they're nailing, crushing. But this one thing, but that one thing is really important. I'm like, well, yes, I hear you. But do you realize that on the team they are on, that team has that covered? So they don't need to do that. And they're leaning into the strengths that they have, that the team needs. And that was, to me, I mean, this happened several years ago, but to me, that was kind of the aha moment, if you will. Like, why are we so focused on the individual and losing sight of what's really important? Because if we want to scale an organization out, yes, we do that with individuals, but more importantly, we do that with well-functioning teams. Like, are we doing it wrong? And sorry, company, like, I'm not calling you out. Like, we're all doing the best we can. I'm glad that, we have frameworks for all of this, but I would love to keep iterating on it to layer in the impact of a team and almost measure that first. And then if the team is doing well, then look at the individuals on the team and how they're contributing to that team. Right. So that was kind of the big switch for me, and where I started looking at, well, what should the team, be covering? And is it important for every individual on that team to be covering every aspect of it at any given point in time? Or can we pare that back and say no, actually the team's doing really well in this, and they're really good at this other thing. So let them really dive in on that, and it's okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because if a person has a particular weakness, like let's say they, can't give presentations, they suck at presenting. Well, maybe you have someone on the team that's great at it. And so it doesn't matter if one guy sucks at it, right? It's the team that counts, not the individual.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. And, if that person is lacking in that thing, there's always things like mentorship or, maybe it's just practice. Maybe they're just, they haven't done a lot. So it could give them an opportunity to do it in a less unfriendly, I would say, a safer environment to give them, maybe it's a confidence thing. There's a myriad of different things that could be there that would cause that person to not be at their utmost for or be considered weak or lacking in that area. So there's definitely ways to improve that.
Almost the opposite approach. Like, if they're not a good presenter, so what? They really don't have to focus on that. What is their strength? If they have a strength, well, maybe we can make them even stronger at it. So don't focus on your weakness, focus on your strength.
What say you, Liz, about that?
I love both approaches. And I think there's great circumstances for each, right? There's room for all of it. Wouldn't it be amazing if on your team, you were more than free to show up and be like, you know what? I'll use a personal example. This happened to me, right? Like, there was a team I was on and I just came in, I was like, you know what, y'all? I know nothing about networks. I don't get it. I have this huge mental block every time they come up. I just kind of shut down a little bit. So y'all cover that, because I'm going to cover scripting and performance and and I just listed out all my strengths that I wanted to double down on, but I was super interested in learning more about network concepts and everything. So I was like, so if y'all don't mind, like you play to those strengths, let me ride your coattails a little bit, if you will. Let me learn from you and be messy in this space. And then I'm going to cover this other stuff. Okay. So being able to be comfortable to show up as your full self and not have to hide that. And I mentioned a very specific skill, but like this could apply to anything like code reviews, like system designs and architecture. Like, you know, how do you get started in that? Right. Wouldn't it be neat if you were just like, hey, I think that would be really cool. I'm interested. Can I be somebody who's not well-versed in this space, in this team? And can I grow in that? And maybe I don't want to, so maybe that's okay. Or maybe I'm curious and want to get into there. And I think it would be really neat if, depending on the situation and depending on the team, we made room for it.
Right. Okay. All right. So you have 5 pillars here. You plan, work, communicate, grow, and give. And they're not they're in a circular formation around the team pillars, but they're not a cyclical thing. Like
correct.
So, okay, that's cool. So let's start with the first one, because planning always seems to be something that PMs have.
One of my favorites. Of course, I could say that about all of them. But
really? Okay. All right. So you mentioned here defining projects. And if you go to the blog post, she's got an awesome mind map here. If you right click and open the image in a new tab, it blows it up to a nice big size. So almost suitable for framing. So you could go and check these things out. Does this pillar conform to any kind of methodologies? I'm thinking like the PMP kind of process, or Agile, or Scrum. How would you kind of, I don't want to say pigeonhole or shoehorn this in, but does it follow any specific methodologies like that?
Oh no, I would say I've completely stolen, like cloned and mutated, if you will, my favorite parts of all of them.
Okay. All right.
I'm a huge fan of Racy Daisy. I do like Agile, and I've done it a lot. I'm very familiar with Kanban, right? Like I said, this is me collecting the areas and points that I've really found work for me personally here. So you're going to see little snippets of them all.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. So the first thing you have 2 headers under plan, defining projects, and be intentional with long-term objectives. Now,
yes.
Yeah, you mentioned 12-month roadmaps and a process to update it routinely. So from a Scrum type point of view, you're going to how would you create a 12-month roadmap if maybe you don't even yourself know that?
So what I like to frame this as is more a fluid roadmap, right? Like it happens all the time where I know the things that we've been tracking to date, and I know what my users and my customers are asking of me, and what my stakeholders and leaders want to see of our group. And at the same time, I promised you that in a month, I'm going to get new information. There's going to be some disruption in the industry. There's going to be a fire that we need to react to. And so what's really important to me is that we have a well-defined paved path for factoring that information in. And to me, the first thing it starts with is that fluid roadmap, right? So that I know, like, okay, great. This is coming in as a new request or a new need. Where is this going to fit into things that I've already communicated or understood that are also a need, right? Like if I'm working on, big project A, and it comes in 4 phases, and then, out of nowhere, this new thing comes in. Do I want to put it in between phase B and C? Do I want to totally cancel phase D and just set it aside and do this instead? And right, like it makes it easier to have those conversations when I have a little bit of the context of what the impact of those decisions are going to be, right? It's just, it's almost like a big to-do list instead of a small one. Like if I keep a list and I need to put something else on it, do I just put it at the bottom? Do I put it at the top because it's the last thing I heard? No, ideally it would be very easy for me to review what things are out there and slide it in the right place with a mindful, with some mindfulness to, the business impact and the needs of all the things, right? So that's
right.
When I say roadmap, that is what I'm talking about. It's kind of that full list of things that I know that are out there that I have to factor into my decisions.
Right. Okay. So when you're doing the roadmap, I also saw down here you have it on the defined projects part. So because part of the roadmap is defining what projects you're going to be doing in the next 12 months, which would also mean you're trying to set achievable goals and targets, which often brings up the SMART, acronym, which
Yes.
I have Mr. Betcher turned me on to Manager Tools podcast, which one podcast I heard was smart goals are dumb because
I love that episode. I know it well.
So I have worked at places where I was, given a goal that somebody made 8 months ago, and I can easily tell them that this is not achievable and should never have been a goal in the first place, but had been signed off on. So
right
from that,
there, right? Yeah. That's new information, right? And do we have a way to factor that back into the plan? That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, do we set these roadmaps and just like stick to them like glue? Oh, please, I hope not, right? Even when there's customers involved and public facing things, like new information comes in all the time, right? We want to have the best quality that's possible. Security things happen, right? Like pandemics, worldwide pandemics happen. How do we accommodate that? Do we have a plan for revisiting that and factoring the new information in that's easy to execute on?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that goes to part of process improvement and being, I have, explained that to people where you have to walk back, potentially, okay, we're not going to make this, we're going to make this, and we can work towards this like next year. But having to walk back some of those perceived goals
and reach that new alignment, right? Yes.
Right. Because it's an iterative process, right? Goals should not necessarily be set in stone. It's an iterative thing. Yeah, we didn't make it this year. We'll get better next year. I mean, unless you're actually, trying to do things like, sell product or something and you didn't make them, but
just a little thing like that. Yeah.
Just a little thing. So
and it's super interesting even then, right? Like, what's the relationship with our customers like, right? Can we tell them that, we thought we were going to do this and this is going to be big and solve all the things. And then we dug into it and we learned this, and we think this is going to be even better for you, but it means we are going to wait another 2 months. We're delaying the release. Like, can we have those conversations? Like, and it gets, the bigger the market and the bigger the opportunities, the harder those things are to navigate, but there are things we can do. It doesn't mean it's impossible. And how, our muscles, are they good in this area? I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I think it also depends on who broadcasts those goals in the first place. If you've got a salesperson out there who's going, we're gonna move heaven and earth for you, and it's like, sorry, we can only move earth. We can't move heaven right now.
I'm holding on to heaven just a little bit.
Heaven's going to take a bit. So the one thing I should have asked before we started with this is, how does this scale? Because I mean, obviously this would work better with a smaller team versus a team of 500 or something. So, at what point
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah.
How would something like this scale? I mean, obviously if you have a team of 500, obviously you're not in the trenches anymore. You're thinking, organizationally or strategically. You're not tactical or down in the weeds. So, can this still apply to teams, quote unquote, of larger than, say, a 5 or 10, or what is that? Was that Jeff Bezos guy said 2 pizza teams or something?
Yeah, the 2 pizza teams.
The 2 pizza team thing.
I would say it definitely is targeted for the definition of a team being, like an EM and 8 to 10 engineers. I would also say it translates well to a director and 5 to 6 teams with them. Beyond that, I'm going to say it's too detailed, right? Even at the department level, I'm kind of stretching and squinting here because I like to give a little more, maybe it's a good framework to frame anything around, but then it has to be applied in different manners because you want to give the department some flexibility to operate within that, but at the same time, stick to the framework of flexibility that you need. But yeah, to be clear, this is definitely targeted at a single team or a small group of teams, and not like an entire engineering organization at a large enterprise.
Okay. Okay. Does culture have anything to do with it? Is there a culture that you have to have the right culture to be able to do this? Because I know that there's some out there that's probably like, yeah, this isn't going to work for me. I can already tell that half of this stuff isn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
So is there
Absolutely.
a specific culture that this would make sense in? Obviously, it sounds like your own company is very, very friendly to this. I don't know if I could actually do some of this in my own company, or it would definitely take a bit of heavy lift and me being a more effective filter for my folks to make this a thing. But where would this work the best?
I think this starts a conversation about alignment on the culture that you want to have, or that you do have, right? And taking a step inward to see, like, does this fit who we want to be, where we want to go, what we see us achieving from a product perspective and an employee development perspective. I want to shout out, my company is amazing, but this is not the model we follow, right? Like, this is the thing that I use to spark the same conversations at my company. And we do have a fantastic framework, but I love just kind of pushing it a little further. And that's what this is really good for. Like, what if it were possible to, like have a 12-month roadmap and a really strong like, what would that look like? And what would we need to tweak if we wanted to do that? And is that something we even want to do? Does that fit here? And it, again, with, you mentioned Agile and PMP and all the different frameworks, we end up taking the best parts of them that work for us and applying them in a manner that works for us. To me, though, these 5 pillars, everybody's doing them at some level. So, maybe as you get further out in the map, it's going to change a bit. But if you're not covering every one of these somehow, then you're explicitly not covering it. And what does that mean? What is the consequence of that? And maybe it's totally acceptable, right? Maybe that works for your model.
Okay. Mr. Betcher, you've worked at a few organizations that you and I have not worked with. Have you seen examples where these things actually, would work in your organizations, or what would have been your experience with some of these concepts and defining projects? I mean, you yourself work in a project team of 1 with Login B, but if you had a team, would these be something that you could easily implement?
I think so. This is like a guide, right? So if you have a project going on and you have a framework that you're working at, it would help to look at this and make sure you're capturing a lot of these things, right? Like capture future work items and technical debt reduction, allow for unplanned work, right? Make sure that you have that so that you've got achievable deadlines. Right. And that there will be some unplanned work on the horizon.
Yeah. Well, unplanned work in the incident response world is pretty like priority 0, right? I mean, when you get unplanned work, that pretty much means that you're going to be pulling some long hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I was talking more project based, IR, it's drop everything and do that. But yes, the unplanned work can include incidents, in that space.
Right. So, Liz, when we're talking unplanned work, is that because we didn't plan well enough when we're defining the projects or our requirements? And also this kind of goes along the lines with where I was heading for communications. It's like, we're not communicating with other teams. We're not doing, along the lines of defining the projects, figuring out things like requirements, pulling in other teams. Maybe we don't want to pull some teams in because they're notoriously difficult to work with.
Or they're
when
busy,
we're talking,
right? We always have the teams that are on the hot thing and they're focused heads down on that. So we can't pull them away. How do we still get our stuff done? Yes, that. There's an element of that, I suppose. And I think that it's worth acknowledging that we can always do better. But at the same time, we're all doing the best we can, right? And I love acknowledging that, I can hardly think of a team that's like, I'm really out to to just throw over the rest of the company. Let's do that. Like, no, of course not. Like they're doing the best they can with the constraints that they have to work with, just like us. So in that sense, I like to look at it more of, let me just say this. If we're not doing retros, do more retros. If you do no other meeting, like cancel all the other meetings, but don't cancel the retro, because the retro is where you have those conversations like, well, what do we want to keep? What's working well for us? What do we want to stop doing? And what do we want to start? So to your question, I think it's the same notion, right? Like, yes, this could have gone better. What would we do different next time? Let's focus on that rather than fully trying to unpack like, well, this guy said and that, but this, like we're not talking like, well, yeah, I hear you. And that's of course truth, but what do we want to try next? How can we do this better next time? And let's focus on that and keep on moving.
Right. And the retrospectives and the lessons learned we're talking about this from a development or an engineering standpoint, but this is very applicable to the security space as well.
Oh, absolutely.
We have projects that we have to implement. We have teams that we have to work with or work against in some cases, or we feel like we're working against some teams in many cases, but this is all very applicable to those things. Yeah. And everybody, I would argue that everybody's a project manager because they're always managing something. Mm-hmm. They're always managing their schedule, their time, their work, the resources that they have available. Everybody is a project manager. They just don't define it as thus. When, your unplanned work is just, it's either, oh, I didn't expect that to occur when I formatted this hard drive or tried to, run two patches at the same time. So now I'm working a weekend or something like that. Or I don't really want to talk to finance because they're going to make me do X, Y, and Z, which is avoidance. That's a risk avoidance. You're avoiding that risk of them actually making you do that additional work. How's that for risk management? Anyway. But
even in those cases, right? Like what did we want to take away from that? What did we learn? Have we captured that as a learning? Like, well, we're avoiding, the risk avoidance and the paperwork and the headache and the, what could we do? Why do they do that? Do we understand why they do that? Could we internalize why that's important? Could they internalize why we want to skip it? Yep. How can we reach across that barrier next time, earlier ahead of time? Again, what do we want to do with that information? It's all information. Right. Yep. We don't even have to put the negative connotation with it. It's what happened. Right. It's a thing. Got it. What do we want to do with that?
Yep. And, for us, we talk about shifting left. If it's something that we know we're going to run into, we should probably think about it being the first thing that we confront when we're starting a process or an engagement or a project or something like that, because we know that we're going to have to deal with that. So we figure out what needs to be done ahead of time. So shifting left is not just an engineering. Yeah.
Love it.
Communication. I like the over communication. I like being transparent. I actually like changing the way we communicate at an org. So when I was working with a team, I brought a vendor online. This is a real story in my current organization. I work with a vendor to do security assessments, and we're having a meeting with them, and I'm bringing on yet another company to help do security assessments. And I started having meetings with both teams at the same time. And for the rest of my TPM friends in my organization, it's taboo because it's like, oh, you don't talk to two competing companies. And I'm like, look, they're all doing the same work. There's no competition. It's not like we're doing CFPs or, RFPs or something for them. And, I know what information I should not share with company A and company B, which would be things like pricing information or whatever. But a lot of times company A may be working with a project now, and in 3 months later, company B will be doing that exact same project for follow-on work and would need to either be able to collaborate with company A in some way or have their access to the report or do whatever. And it's good to have them, cross-mogenate, if you pardon an Austin Powers term, but have that collaborative effort where it's not us versus them. It's not enemies. It's not that way. So I tend to try to be as transparent as possible when I'm communicating with those folks, because I I find in terms of vendor management, because I like to think that I'm a good vendor manager. And, but it's interesting in how you kind of turn that thinking on your head because, that's one company and they're competing with this other company. I'm like, look, we're all doing the same work, that kind of thing.
We're all in it together. And think of the opportunities that you gave them to learn to factor in their own information and new data points, right? And factor that back into how they want to do business. You're giving them a gift, if you will, if you want to frame it that way. And what are they going to do with that? They may turn around in a year and thank you so much for that opportunity, because look where they are now, because it, brought something to light that they wanted to turn around. And one thing I want to really point out here is, especially when we're talking about what do we want to do next and breaking, down interrupt work and all of this, is the idea isn't to just, la-di-da and go around like robots and everything is fine and we can figure it out. It's like, allow the messiness is really the message I want to bring here. Is it's totally understandable when we fall on it, hard, and when we need to take a step and look at what we're doing. The idea is more about, let's not beat ourselves up about it. Like, it's totally a thing. So like, allow the emotion, allow the processing, allow the team to feel what they're going to feel about it, and then help guide them to what are we going to do about it. Like, allow the space for them to process, but then keep the momentum going and keep things moving forward, and not in a way that doesn't acknowledge or that downplays their experience with the interrupt work, right? Like, it sucks. And it's hard when you've got the teams that are difficult to work with, but when you can build a culture of supporting each other through it and reaching across these divides, if you will, and understanding what the others are going through, then, I mean, what you're saying there with the vendors, it's like, what if we work together that way across the world even? Like, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yep. Yeah. I hate silos. Reaching out to, different company, departments have their own security teams, and, you'll often find once you start talking with those people, they have the same pain points, or they may be working on a tool that will help solve your problem, and vice versa. Or, then you start engaging and, hey, we should create a governance council or something where we can, talk about this thing across the entire enterprise. And,
oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Like, when you make space for that kind of activity, look at the amazing, diverse, robust outcomes that come as a result. Just because you slowed down a bit and brought others in and fostered those relationships and took a look at what you were doing yourself and as a team and everything. And that's what I'm talking about, is like, that space is so important. So what can we do to curate it and foster it? And yes, we are going to be sacrificing some high-paced work. I'm all in. Let's do it.
Yep.
So you're under communicate, you have curiosity over animosity. Is there a story behind that?
One story? No, I think this happens a lot just in our day-to-day communications, right? Especially now that a lot of us are not working, where we spin around in an office chair and just have conversations. And then like we duke it out and it gets messy, but then we go to lunch and everything's fine, or we go out for drinks. Like, I think a lot of what's happening is we stand behind our, our Zoom persona, if you will, or our, Twitter persona. And it's not like we're putting up barriers, but the barriers are naturally there. And so what I'm talking about with curiosity versus animosity is, how much can you put yourself out, like past that barrier? And, when something happens on the surface, that of course the normal human reaction is going to be like, whoa, like, finance team, you're going to make me do what now? And like, forget it. But then stop for a second and be curious again, like I was saying, like, well, why does the finance team want you to do that? Like, maybe they don't even know. Maybe it's just been that way for forever. Well, that's interesting. Or maybe they're like, oh, we've been burned. We had this project just go totally off the rails and it cost billions of dollars, and we don't want to do that again. So we're going to put these safeguards in place because that's what we came up with in our retro, right? And so when you're presented with a situation where it would be totally normal to just flip out and table flip, and what could you do to be like, slow down, take a breath, and be like, And that's super interesting that they responded that way. I wonder what's going on for them.
Very cool. Very cool. So I do want to move down to grow and give, but one of the things that I was noticing with regards to the plan, work, and communicate was each one of these is based on a different motivation, what motivates somebody. So I like to consider myself a collaborator and a communicator versus somebody who would be, more goal oriented, or somebody who is motivated by making sure the product gets out. I am motivated by that, but sure. I don't consider it as high a priority as making sure that we're, making sure everybody is understanding and on the same page. We've talked about teams and them scaling. Mr. Betcher's talking about the guy who, or the person who can't, brief people well enough. Would you task each of these pillars potentially with specific people in your team based on what their strengths are or what motivates them? If they're not motivated by, performance, they're motivated by, creating networks and stuff. Would that be something that would be your thought there?
Maybe I've done that before. Here's my only advice in that space is don't lock yourself into one model for your team, right? If Joe does all the planning and Sally does all the communicating, like what would happen if we asked Sally to, come in and plan this one thing, or, take a look at what you can do to be flexible and shake it up a bit for the situation that you're in. Like every time you're embarking on a new journey together, like that's a great time to stop for a second and say, okay, well, Joe's been planning for forever and he does really well at it. What if, right? And so yes, and I would say yes, do that. It definitely helps you get in a cadence and develop those strengths, but we're here to develop all of us too, right? So when there's an opportunity to let somebody else step into that space and the team can accommodate it, and somebody has interest there, like, why wouldn't you go for it?
Yeah. Yep. No, that makes sense. All right. So we're getting down to the give and grow, which I actually think are probably the most important parts of this, because I feel that these are probably more collaborative. In the give side, you're talking about mentors and sponsors and advocates. In the grow side, you're talking about innovating and experimenting. A lot of these things do require a very collaborative type environment where people can feel free to give ideas, to think out loud, if you will, or brainstorm. What are some of the prerequisites for a strong give and grow type environment, or does everything kind of build upon themselves where you need to have good communication and work ethic and planning to make those happen?
I think it's both. As far as prerequisites go, I would say you have to make space for it, right? You have to have some allotment of time that the team has some freedom to do these types of activities. If their schedule is so crunched with feature, driven deadlines, they're not going to make time for this type of activity. They're just not, because they're just, banging away at the things that they need to produce. Or if they're just so inundated with, incident response and those kind of things, they're not going to make time for this, right? So digging in and what can you do to intentionally make some space and set some expectations that this is important for us for the future? That is the only prerequisite that I can really think of. Right. Forget that. I can say there's another one, and that's setting the expectation with the people on your team. I hear you. There is a lot to do. And yes, the customer isn't going to be as directly interested in this. Got it. Right. And I expect it out of you. This is good for us. It's good for our culture. It's good for you. So we're going to do this, right? And just setting that expectation up along with the time made available so that people can do this. But the other thing, it shouldn't be mandatory for every person. Again, maybe you just have somebody who's totally not interested in that space and they just want to stay down and stay heads down and work on a thing. Well, great. But here's my hope is that maybe after working with this team for a year and seeing their teammates do this, maybe they get, some interest sparked and they want to branch into this and try one thing, right? That would be amazing. That's what this is all about, right? Is providing those opportunities and those thoughts. And so a lot of flexibility in there. The only thing I would caution is that, again, when we're playing to each other's strengths, if somebody is like, oh, I just want to give all the time and I want my full-time job to be mentor, well, sorry, that's not part of the job actually.
Right.
Sorry, it is part of the job, but it is not your full-time job, right? So we do have to set boundaries and make sure it's clear that you expect, like pick a side project, like pick a 10% project that you're going to work on for 4 hours on a Friday and kind of set some boundaries that that's what that space is for, but not 3 days a week. And just be clear with each other what those expectations and boundaries are so that it doesn't end up bumping into each other. Like, oh, but you said it's important for me to grow and this is what I'm doing to grow. Like, well, yes, but I also need you to do your day job. So yeah, as far as prerequisites and boundaries and everything, I think that's the most important part, is just aligning with your team on how you all want to do it.
Right. Cool. Okay. So I'm a person listening to this podcast, and I think, wow, Liz is an awesome person, and she comes with a lot of excellent information. I would like to start this at my organization, but I don't know where to start. It looks so big. I don't know where to start. So what would be a good, I don't want to say quick win, because I've started coming around to the fact that there are no quick wins. What is a good first place to maybe start with? Is it communication chain? Is it planning? Is it the growing part? What is a good first place to start in this regard?
So honestly, that is entirely situation dependent, right? And I totally understand. I've looked at models that I've found interesting before and said, oh my goodness. Oh, I remember when DevOps first came out, and remember the Gartner DevOps map, and you're like, wow, mind blown. What am I going to do first? There's no way I'll ever get there. The thing is, pick one thing. What resonates with you? Pick it with your team. Maybe have a retro if you're not doing retros. You already heard I'm such a fan. Like, that would be a good time to say, of all these things, what is the one thing that y'all think we should look at doing better? And how can we move the needle on this? But that would be my biggest advice, is don't try to tackle all of it. Pick one thing that resonates for you and your team and see what you can do to introduce that. And when that gets an uncomfortable space, take another look. What else do you want to pull out? The big thing, again, is just aligning on that culture and coming together as a team and building those relationships so that you can work more productively together, so that when somebody says, oh, we're having too many meetings, we're able to talk about that instead of just back channel each other. And so anything that gets the needle a little bit farther on pulling the team together, do that. Right.
Yeah. I think I think you have to define what your problem is. So there's definitely a definition. It would seem like you would, at least in my opinion, it feels like you would have to define what the problem is. So my problem would be going to my own management to define that problem, or finding ways to carve out that time, and like you said, making sure that it's a side project, or you treat it as an improvement area where we're deficient. So sometimes I may actually take you writing a white paper, or writing a point paper or something stating where you feel the problem might be. Again, depending on how friendly your environment is, you may not want to put your name on that. You may just want to submit it anonymously, but yeah, there may be some work to get to where you want to be. So
absolutely.
I can definitely, yeah.
As long as you're taking small steps to get there, right? Like if you start with a paper, that paper didn't exist yesterday. So good on you. Like that's a step in the right direction. If you had a retro, well, we didn't do that last time and we had some good action items out of it. Like to do something, like maybe if I'm at fault for anything, I have a huge bias for action. So take some action, try something. If you fail, who cares? So what? You can try something else.
Yep. Yeah. And if somebody's like, oh, I don't like retros, nothing good ever comes out of them, you can always call them something else,
Yeah. Brand it how it works for you. I am 100% a fan of that. And I have definitely seen the retros that turn into, grown-up bitch sessions that we just all sit around and you end up leaving feeling more terrible. Well, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to have that, time it, put a little 11-minute timer on, let it go, and then be like, all right, bringing it back.
Yep. Yep. Mr. Betcher, you have any other questions, any other thoughts, anything you want to bring up?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So let me see. So there's a couple of links in our show notes. The discussion about high performing teams from Netflix. I think I found it. The Erin Meyer actually did the study, the Netflix study. And I added one for why smart goals are stupid. I also added a couple of news items about Windows 11 now somebody found the God mode in Windows 11 for advanced settings. And there's some NFT malware out there that will NFTs that actually empty your Bitcoin wallets. So that's pretty fun. So it's not fun if you own the NFTs that emptied your wallet, but yeah. So Liz, how would people find you if they wanted to talk more about management theory? Hey, my company is a shit show and I want to figure out how to improve it. So thank you for coming on the show. How would they find you if they wanted to talk to you about that?
I'm at lizsailing.com. That's S as in Sam, ALING. I'm Twitter and LinkedIn. And yeah, you reach out to me at lizsailing.com.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Yeah, like I had mentioned before the show, I became a filthy PM about 3 years ago, working at Leviathan, of course, and now my new company, completely different PM type roles. So the one at Leviathan was a consultant gig where I was working with companies. Now I'm at the company working with consultants, which is kind of odd. It's kind of a reversal of fortune, whether it be good or bad, I don't know. But I have found that the dynamics at larger companies are definitely different than smaller companies, and you have to navigate those. So that was one thing that that's why I enjoyed your blog post. So I do appreciate you taking the time to come in and speak. And I noticed it's still light outside where you live. That must be nice.
It is. I am in Kona, Hawaii. So I should say that if you're ever on the islands and want to grab a shave ice, hit me up.
Okay. We do have a couple of security conferences out there. ShakaCon, I believe, is one that we do out there. Well, but somebody has done out there in the past. I actually have some friends of mine who live in the Honolulu area.
Nice.
And yeah.
I was going to say, I know there's a couple security conferences. There's one in Kauai. I know there's one that hits Big Island once in a while.
Yep. Yeah. I'm in Seattle, so I'm, 4 or 5 hour flight away. I would come over in a heartbeat. Once we start doing these things.
Straight shot to Kona. Yes. Travel safely, Be healthy and well, everyone.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Thanks. I do appreciate you coming on, Liz, and taking the time to speak with us about all this. And please continue blogging, because I think a lot of people get a lot of content and good out of your words. So
I love it. Well, this was a blast. Thank you both so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Betcher, tell us a little bit about what you're doing with LogMD and why people should check out LogMD.
Yeah. So if you are responsible for securing Windows systems and you don't know where to start, it's a great place to start. We have a lot of resources, and the tool helps you configure Windows to catch malicious activity so that you can see it in the logs and elsewhere. So yeah, that'll be a great place to start, and it's free. So check it out at log-md.com.
All right. So Ms. Berlin, if she was here, she would tell you about what she was doing, but I will do my best to be a good proxy for her. She is one of the creators of Hackers Health on Twitter, or Hackers Health on Twitter, and does workshops at conferences to highlight and to help destigmatize mental health issues in the information security community. She also does a InfoSec role play, which is the Twitter handle, where she does tabletop incident response exercises. You can find her also on Twitter at InfoSister, INFOSYSTIR, and of course she's an accomplished author and obviously mother of 3 boys and is an amazing person. So please check out all that she does. You can find those links online at InfoSister on Twitter. So you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYAN BRAKE, and you can follow the podcast at BreakSec. And our website is breakingsecurity.com, BRAKEING security.com. Thank you to our Patreon supporters for all of their support that pays for our Zoom account, hosting fees. I actually just re-upped our breaksec.com domain just recently. So the money went to help that. Also goes to our nonprofit, the InfoSec Education Foundation, which I'm the president of. And we try to help out with educational opportunities for folks. I am looking for mentors. One of our Slackers had reached out to us and said that there are some people from Afghanistan who are trying to be extracted from the company, and they are looking for potential opportunities once their living situation stabilizes a little bit, but they're looking for things like free training. They're looking for web, potentially, any kind of training. Several people have CS degrees, I believe that he had said. This is Mr. Venomous on our Slack. So if you join our Slack, which you can send us an invite to breaksec or bds.podcast@gmail.com, you can talk to them. They have degrees, and they'll be looking for work once they come to the States. With the remote work being the way it is, everybody should be able to find jobs just fine these days. But if your organization is hiring IT personnel or potential web developers, people who are, coming from a not very good place to gain asylum here in the U.S., please feel free to reach out. Hit me up on Twitter, and I'll get you in contact with Mr. Venomous, and hopefully we can help these folks get off on the best foot here in the U.S. So please reach out if you can. And I think that's it. I hope everyone has a great week. Mr. Betcher, thank you for coming. Liz, thank you again for joining us. We'll do what we can to get this out as soon as possible. And I hope we can have you back on in the near future with another interesting discussion.
Oh, I'd love to.
Awesome. All right. Well, that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Stay healthy. Get your shots. Wash your hands, you nasties. Take care of yourselves, because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.